Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Active Packaging for the Rising E-commerce Demand, brought to you by Seafood Source and sponsored by Aptar. We have a few housekeeping notes to go over before we get started. If you have any technical questions or issues using the WebEx platform, please use the chat box and I will respond right away. If you have any issues with audio, please click on the phone icon above the chat window to receive the teleconference info. For those that do call in, to ensure call quality, everyone's lines have been muted. If you happen to get disconnected, you can log on again using the instructions provided in your webinar confirmation email. If you continue to experience difficulty, please email webinars@seafoodsource.com and we will respond as soon as we can. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. Please type your questions into the chat box and hit send to submit them. At the end of the presentation, we will have our presenter answer these questions. This webinar will be recorded and you will receive a thank you email with the on-demand materials within 3 business days. And with all of that out of the way, I would like to welcome our speaker and hand the presentation off to Krista Biggs, Manager of Business Development at Aptar. Welcome, Krista.
Thank you, Jovi, and definitely a big thank you to all of our guests today, and happy April Fool's Day. You know, I picked this day for my webinar on purpose in the event that something did go wrong. That way I had something to blame. I am going to stop my video for sake of distraction. I was reading an article recently and it said, over the last decade, e-commerce changed the world. Over the last year, COVID-19 changed e-commerce. And that couldn't be more true, so that's the basis of what we're talking about today. This new demand, where we've come from in e-commerce and where it's going as it relates to seafood. We're going to look at how this market has changed, how it's still changing, and what we can do with seafood to help get our best foot forward and make good first impressions to consistently meet e-commerce needs for the category. Like Jovi said, I am Krista Biggs. I represent the Aptar Food Protection Business Unit. My background is in food technologies and microbiology. And first, if you'll allow me to introduce who Aptar is, you can see why and where we fit into solving problems with packaging. The Aptar Group has been a global leader in packaging systems for over 70 years. We're a $3 billion company and a leader in dispensing technologies across the beauty and home, food and beverage, and pharmaceutical spaces. But our business unit, however, the one I'm a part of, is more about food protection. We are material science focused, and we've been developing advanced technologies for over 20 years. Our claim to fame was our patented 3-phase active polymer that's used in a lot of these products that people count on every day. And we've recently brought that technology to the food safety world and to seafood. Just a little bit about the polymer, so we know what we're talking about as we move forward, is it's got 3 parts displayed in this center image. Parts 1 and 2 are a majority base polymer, with the second being a channeling agent. That third piece, though, is what makes it so special. It's an active component that can be one of many chemistries to meet specific needs. This butterfly display is showing the flexibility of what that polymer can do. The right side is showing how it can be implemented into different manufacturing processes, but the chemistries on the left are probably what could be important to this group. These are examples of its real commercialization in moisture control, oxygen scavenging, pathogen reduction, and odor removal. So how does all this relate to seafood? Well, we leverage 2 of our existing platforms to create a unique formulation that has been integrated into an active packaging system that we call Seawell. Seawell was designed to mitigate seafood supply chain issues and different freshness and safety challenges that the industry faces. Challenges that are even more prevalent today with this rising demand for e-commerce solutions. But before we do dive exactly into how Seawell fits into this market, I'd like to instead first take a look at that landscape of e-commerce, where it's come from over the decades, and what we can do to better serve seafood and consumers alike in this new retail reality. Looking back a little bit into where we've come from, at least in American history, we can look back over the last 40, 50 years where we would drive into town to do our shopping, go to multiple stores. the local mercantile, the tailor, the butcher, the bakery, the produce stands, and of course the ice cream parlor, to pick up certain goods from certain kinds of vendors. This ultimately paved way for the modern day supermarket, a one-stop giant store in city center with a wide assortment of goods, where shopping is convenient, the quality is good enough, and the prices are cheaper. Skip ahead another decade and a half, and we go digital. The information age, like the Industrial Revolution before it, comes along and changes the way we live, communicate, do business, and of course shop. In only 40 years, the internet went from a system that could barely send 2 letters without crashing to transporting advanced communication within seconds. A fun fact that I didn't know until preparing for this was that a Pizza Hut pizza was the first thing purchased on the internet back in 1994. From there, we never looked back. Now we're moving away from the traditional supermarkets by being connected to our families, our devices, our cars, our houses, and even using the internet as a primary means of shopping and feeding ourselves through online ordering for in-store pickups and at-home food deliveries. What all this tells us is that things evolve. We've had decade-long developments that have brought on this new boom in e-commerce. We forget that advancements in history now allow us these conveniences and just how timely they are in getting us through a current day pandemic. Most of the people on this call have been subject to the philosophy that change brings opportunity. And although change prompts us to make necessary adjustments and adapt to new situations, the pandemic kind of kicked us into a forced adaptation. A lot of people didn't have a choice but to switch to online if they wanted to survive. The pandemic was a pressure test for e-commerce infrastructures, with some markets faring more resilient than others. Retail and businesses that were still over-reliant on brick and mortar had much more trouble staying afloat, but retail and businesses that did have e-commerce and delivery infrastructures were still tested on the durability of those platforms for the new normal of online consumption habits. The need for an e-commerce platform was immediate. Especially in grocery, this brought threats to established business models and practices. Large players were obviously more shock absorbent and less affected, but we had no choice but to use this opportunity for improvements to our practices, operational efficiencies, and for onboarding better technology. This especially goes for the seafood industry. So as we look at the state of the market right now, I think we're clear on why e-commerce is up. Stay-at-home orders, kids at home for 3 meals a day, retail restrictions, restaurants closed. And we got bored and tried all kinds of delivery services to entertain ourselves. Then we liked it and even decided to become repeat users of some of it. But will e-commerce grocery shopping stick? Changes necessitated by COVID-19 threw us into this next spoke in the cycle of seafood retailing. If consumer research experts are right, shoppers have responded favorably to the changes in the shopping experience, and we will not return to our pre-COVID shopping habits. Ordering groceries online is now normal for many Americans, and I guess despite that a pizza was the first thing bought online, looking back at the online ordering evolution, food in general has been the last frontier for e-commerce. And that makes sense because it's the one thing subject to challenges of maintaining refrigerated or frozen temperatures for a 1 or 2 day shipment. Some experts even believe there will be like a pent-up demand for getting back into restaurants. Chief economists say the cash reserves are off the charts and we're going to see a fuel for a consumer-led boom. This could be true. It's certainly worth considering because during the pandemic, household savings rates surged and the economy is still expected to grow another 6.5% this year. Personal savings dramatically improved because consumer spending plummeted. The average American saved between $300 and $400 a month by not going out to eat or traveling. Instead, we spent time and money on other things, namely online purchasing. To that end, The food industry has had to adapt to that massive uptick in online grocery sales, which has certainly benefited the seafood category. If you had a chance to listen to the webinar yesterday, those guys had some really great data on retail and supermarkets around seafood sales. Specifically, e-commerce seafood sales tripled in 2020 to reach 1.1 billion US dollars, with the biggest gainer being in shellfish. Overall, fresh seafood jumped another 39% just in January of this year. So this isn't viewed as a spike because of meat shortages, holidays, or promotions. This is sustained high demand. A study by Mercatus predicted that 20% of all food shopping would happen online by 2025 to the tune of a $250 billion annual spend. Now, I tried to find what that projected 20% meant to us, but the only thing I could come up with was that in 2019, e-commerce made up only 2% of total food and beverage sales. So what we do know is that we'll potentially be going from 2% to 20% in only 5 years. This Mercatus group, they fielded these surveys last November, and they reported that just the delivery and pickup segments captured 73% of all online grocery shopping by the end of November of last year, and 77% by the end of January of this year. This growth between November and January came from purely new households buying online. So the growth is organic. More and more people are becoming accustomed to purchasing online, and these active delivery and pickup shoppers report record high repeat intent rates of 83%. We need to keep this repeat rate high, and we'll explore how to do that as we move forward. This graph shows the latest online grocery sales data and seafood numbers. The total U.S. online grocery market posted $8.1 billion in sales during November 2020. But what's not shown is that it went on to hit $9.3 billion by the end of January of this year, as 70 million U.S. households started ordering groceries online. These U.S. consumers placed on average 2.8 orders per month across delivery, pickup, and direct-to-consumer shipped home. So it's evident the U.S. has an expanded base of engaged customers who continue to become more comfortable shopping online and with a broader range of grocery product. So when we look at all this, we can assume that recovery is coming, even though the timing of it may be up for debate. In terms of the recession recovery, experts believe it's not going to be a slow climb back like the September 11 rebound or the financial crisis in 07-08. This being a health crisis and not a financial one, consumer spending has mostly held up. According to a lot of the recent seafood articles that have been coming out, the biggest increase in sales have been seafood items like snow crab, shrimp, fresh salmon. Even in an article from the marketplace, lobster fishermen noted that they thought demand would fall for lobster with all the restaurants closing, but that ended up not being the case. Crab actually led the top 5 sales gainers in the category, with fresh crab sales reaching 62% in 2020, which I think is really impressive for an already top-selling seafood. But why? Why will e-commerce and seafood e-commerce continue to be important? In one of my last presentations, we looked deep into consumer sentiment on why seafood consumption had been lower when compared to other proteins. But fast forward through COVID, if you look at these previously presumed and common consumer concerns about seafood, as we come out of this pandemic, we're getting a glimpse on how being forced to adapt to this new style of shopping habits ultimately led to resolution of many of the concerns that were keeping people from buying seafood. For example, buying prep and intimidation. The pandemic definitely helped this issue because they bought it online. Regional distribution challenges, the increase in frozen sales hopefully benefited these hard-to-reach people. Decision fatigue and cooking concerns. Seafood has a much wider range of options than pork, beef, and poultry. Before, nobody really had time for that. Life was about being on the go, quick grab, or value-added meals. Now we've got lots of highly experienced at-home cooks because we have plenty of time to stay home and learn something new. And that's somewhat the same with quality and freshness. Before, They didn't know how to judge it. But spending time on devices, reading recipes, reading company histories and stories on the product they were buying educated them on how to pick out a good product. And lastly, before COVID, although the FDA and the American Heart Association recommended eating seafood twice a week to meet important nutritional needs, only 25% of Americans were actually doing that. The pandemic prompted experimentation. This has been our catalyst for change. It's like our recent efforts in attempts to increase seafood consumption was a rocket ship collecting dust, and someone finally fired us off. People figured out how easy it is to prepare. Instead of being intimidated by it for whatever reason, they figured out it's actually hard to ruin a fresh fillet, scallops, shrimp. These items are actually much more forgiving than a fatty steak or overcooked chicken breast or a dry pork chop. Health and wellness. The guys yesterday also had some great data around this. Amid and hopefully almost post-COVID, health and wellness also played a major role in seafood's rising popularity. A survey from the Food Industry Association found that 1/3 of U.S. consumers did actually eat seafood 2 times per week in the past year. And 59% of the people who upped their seafood intake said they had done so because they were trying to eat healthier and boost their immune systems. Even people who previously ate lots of seafood were affected by the health trend, with 72% of these already frequent eaters admitting to putting more effort into making healthy and nutritious choices since the start of the pandemic. And so I think now, maybe more than ever before, it's important that the seafood industry works hard to retain these new customers. We've gotten through this. We know seafood has historically been reliant on the food service and restaurant space. But to sum up our current landscape here, food service, seeing as much as a 70% decline, at-home seafood consumption has boomed during COVID. Sales went up, they stayed up, and they actually went up even more in 2021. There are now more at-home cooks. We're going to the store less and less, spending time on our devices, researching more and more, resulting in comfort with seafood and its preparation. I've heard many longtime seafood experts suggest that now is a critical moment to take control of delivering a good experience because of this pivotal time in this industry. This pandemic was the gateway we needed to get more people adventurous, more creative, eating seafood they've historically shied away from. This is our quote, change bringing opportunity. And the smarter, faster, better we advance in this space now, the more resilient we become. But how do we take all of this newfound information on the state of the market, the seafood sales, the consumer sentiment, and the rise of e-commerce and find a way to build resiliency in the seafood sector? The future will always be hard to predict, but we can package this full-service, wet case reputation in a safe and improved way to maintain that repeat intent rate by providing a good experience with at-home receipt of seafood. The boom in seafood e-commerce has the potential to be truly revolutionary for the industry, I think, and expanding consumption like never before. However, if we don't address common issues with e-commerce deliveries now, the industry does risk losing repeat business and possibly experiencing a backslide in demand as buyers become dissatisfied with the freshness, quality, and overall visual and handling appeal of their seafood deliveries. Because here are images of the seafood that you're getting delivered right now. The image on the left is from a meal kit. Meal kits tend to have the most negatively impacted packaging because they're the most price conscious. And over on the right, even the most premium of solutions is the vacuum skin pack option, but it isn't proving to be the best solution either. It's expensive, and although great for other proteins, it can't handle the liquid content from seafood and oftentimes results in poor presentation. The fillet in the center is the way that direct-to-consumer premium seafood is being delivered right now. These, and over the next couple of slides, are real-life images where I kind of acted like a real consumer out in the field, getting things delivered to me, exploring companies ranging from meal kits to retail to top-tier premium seafood shippers, and this is how nearly all of the products were delivered to me. Meal kits may be understandable and maybe even retail, but stories of the generations of fishermen with high quality premium products from the freshest waters were being lost at point of receipt of package. The seafood was all the same, delivered in poly bags or lost vacuum skin packs that had poor presentation, messy handling, and burst during shipping. Here's some shrimp examples. The fisheries sector, especially shrimp, is one of the most globalized and dynamic industries in world food production, and shrimp is potentially on its way to being positioned as the protein of choice. Even the most inexperienced seafood eater is normally familiar with shrimp. But this slide is showing pictures of 6 different shrimp packages from 6 different companies, some meal kit, some premium, and most of it was a mess. I think Derek Figueroa, president of the Seattle Fish Company, said it best. We really want to make the case that quality seafood can come in many different forms. I agree, we should be providing a memorable experience that is both convenient, frustration-free, but also exciting and unique. That's what we want to do, but it's not what we are doing. Large retail e-commerce is also struggling on the delivery piece. Seafood experts at Publix, Hy-Vee, Meijer's, Walmart have all said seafood retail has been handed an opportunity they've never had. Weiss Grocery Market said their e-commerce sales increased 155% in 2020. But the retail packaging right now isn't set up for protection during a delivery. These retailers are expanding their options as a result of the boom, specifically in shellfish, but it's been hard to do as a fresh item and being sold online. Their interviews state that they're trying to find ways to improve the customer experience such that we can keep the category top of mind for consumers. Online merchandising for these retailers is certainly a better way to engage the customers, but how does the seafood industry address these fresh problems at point of delivery to help maintain our momentum we've gained over the course of the last year and assure those repeat customers? Because home delivery, e-commerce, in-store pickups, and hygiene are at our forefront, demanding a clean, practical, yet premium and still a quality format. This first experience for these newly engaged online shoppers can really make or break what happens next. Many seafood sellers are helping themselves navigate through a tough time by shipping direct, but we're seeing where it could be permanent. User experience can have a lot to do with how permanent we can get it, though. There's statistics about the loss of a repeat purchase and how huge of an opportunity cost it is. People don't think about how critical that first experience is when they're starting something new. We mentioned in the beginning how we, as industry experts, needed to get our best foot forward and make good first impressions because more often than not, our brands are not getting a second chance with customers. Retail Dive had a really interesting study around this, and they talked about how brands had a lot to lose when they don't meet their customers' expectations. Although this was a little heavy on the customer service piece, it also nodded to what can happen across an entire user experience. And that's what's hard to put a number on. How can you accurately define the loss in revenue from a bad experience and non-repeat customers? The article found that 73% of consumers would ghost a brand after 3 or less bad experiences. The report indicated that every consumer touch point, whether it be online or offline, should be seamless. They claim that 53% of consumers are more likely to spread the word to family and friends about their positive interaction with brands. So in our evolving grocery landscape, anticipating consumer needs is going to be key to retention. Additionally, what's contributing to the trouble with seafood is current supply chains are already very travel heavy and not conducive in allowing yet another leg of shipping. The Food and Agricultural Organization says that seafood is the most traded agricultural commodity. In order to travel across countries like this, we all know extensive packing, block freezing, partial thawing, breaking up, repacking, and reshipping is already involved. The current supply chain has extensive overhandling of product, potentially harming quality each time of repack. But let me share with you what tomorrow can look like for seafood. A tomorrow where active packaging comes into play and can help solve a lot of these issues we're seeing. It can offer up an option for the industry to rethink this supply chain altogether, one with more control to eliminate so much repacking to deliver a better product and in a more environmentally friendly fashion. This is how we propose to reshape the future supply chain. Active packaging can allow processed seafood to be frozen and thawed inside the same package. This sort of slack-off type program could be used in a flexible configuration conducive to an e-commerce setting. It's getting harder for larger retailers to justify holding on to their fresh counters, to their self-serve, to their full-serve counters. Like we heard yesterday, a lot of them have even been closed due to COVID and the acceleration in e-commerce. But this is a way for them to package that reputation and deliver those good experiences. One retailer took a shot at rethinking their strategy for the category using Aptar's Seawell Active Packaging. And with that, they've gained the benefits of meeting e-commerce needs better. They've minimized touch points in the supply chain, and they've decreased their waste and labor. Prepackaged for retail also offers up an opportunity for a label for helpful instructions inside the home, transparency on the product, and traceability. For the smaller players, direct-to-consumer shippers and meal kits, this model can decrease shipping costs and protect against temperature abuse as we head into the warmer months. These are examples of the solution. An active packaging alternative able to supply clean handling, quality seafood through e-commerce in a flexible pouch format that incorporates Aptar's drip lock technology that we'll take a look at in the next slide. We felt that brand innovation success in 2021 was going to take creativity, flexibility, disruption, and a lot of change. Seawell Active Packaging Systems combined with the drip lock technology are a combination of function and design, offering better presentation, fresh e-commerce sales, liquid control, and a COVID-friendly contactless product. And we'll also see how it's providing less waste and expanded reach. I'm going to share with you a brief animation of this material science platform we leveraged for seafood. It's a nice 3D version showing how the technology works. We've been working on and constantly improving this drip lock technology for a couple of years now, with our same goal in mind to redefine seafood packaging to extend freshness and quality. This tech is a proprietary and patented blend that has been repurposed into the market to be a first of its kind product. It was initially integrated inside of a traditional tray system, but because of its flexibility, it can be incorporated into any familiar consumer-facing format while behind the scenes mitigating our problems in the supply chain that we witnessed. This schematic shows the patented material science in a pouch feature that we're proposing for the acceleration in e-commerce. The absorbent technology is now quilted into the back of a bag format to provide a pillowed effect, separating the seafood from any liquids. The thawed or even naturally released liquids seep into these cavities to be captured and controlled by the same Seawell drip lock technology. We wanted to maintain a very simple but powerful packaging solution for e-commerce that enhanced quality and freshness throughout the supply chain. The front of this bag, or the top from the angle that you're able to see on the slide, is what the consumer sees. It's clear, allowing complete visibility to the seafood therein, and that clear front is manufactured to meet 10K requirements. The seafood itself is also hiding the back of the pouch where the absorption is happening. Because seafood has some of the largest liquid accumulation, that's why it can be extra challenging in an e-commerce setting. Our material science expertise does enable us to work with the processor to optimize the absorbent capacity per product type to be able to assure the precise amount of absorption needed to deliver the best quality product possible. A case study where we performed with the Sea Grant group at Virginia Tech explored how the liquid control optimization offered by Seawell's drip lock technology impacted the quality and freshness of scallops versus a standard packaging. The results showed that Seawell successfully slowed bacterial growth and product degradation. It decreased the weight loss of the actual proteins and maintained freshness for an additional 3 days post-thaw. Product firmness is also impacted by the presence or absence of liquid. In another case study, we performed a texture analysis on shrimp with Clemson University's chemistry laboratory. 5 samples of a control and a Seawell configuration were tested, and the results were averaged. The control optimization offered by the drip lock technology does indeed help the seafood retain its hardness. These types of measurements are an indicator of quality, and lack or loss of quality of the product can affect the shelf life or even the consumer acceptance of the product. This was the difference in measurements after only a 48-hour thawed time point. So, assuming you ordered seafood through e-commerce and it took a 1 to 2 day shipping time to get to your door, you would already have a better impact. A common t-test analysis shows the difference between these two values is significant, and as the shelf life advances, this delta would become larger. In addition to its ability to preserve the actual seafood quality, freshness, and texture, in today's shipping world, it's also critical that that can be maintained in this e-commerce setting through the primary and secondary packaging. Again, the consumer's impression is highly dependent on how that package is received at their door. Some issues in the online shopping experience do have a lot to do with poor customer service and technology glitches, but the food itself is going through a little extra bumping around, so it's important to deliver this product in an improved way, but also prevent bursts and leaks during shipping so that we don't lose that power of the second purchase. We conducted a standardized packaging integrity test with advanced labs in Illinois. We were on the hunt for a packaging lab to test the resilience of Seawell pouches with seafood in them throughout the supply chain. This particular ASTM test procedure was chosen because it was a strong industry standard that a lot of e-commerce parcels are tested under. It simulates common abuse conditions in every scenario of transport when a package is shipped through a transportation company and delivered to its final destination. We ran this testing scheme twice, once with only 1 package, assuming it was shipped alone, and again with 3 packages to simulate if it were sent with other items. The same pouch packages were used throughout all of these tests, showing each one could withstand each test combined. Each parameter represents different aspects of drops and small and large truck vibrations. But the coolest part of this lab was their ability to simulate low-pressure air travel for packages that would be flown by airplane to ensure no burst or damage occurred. That's what you're looking at in this chamber on the right. This is a unique test with a vacuum chamber to simulate high altitude. A vacuum was applied to the packages at a rate of 1,000 feet every 30 to 60 seconds until the equivalent of 14,000 feet was obtained. This vacuum was maintained for an hour and then released at the same rate of about 1,000 feet every 30 to 60 seconds until complete. Each Seawell package passed these supply chain standards with no visible damage or burst. Over the next couple of slides, I want to share with you some market research where we compared seawell configurations to two different, very predominant and very familiar packaging formats in the market right now: a vacuum skim pack tray and a clear poly bag. We conducted independent market research studies with Kaplan Marketing Research Department in New York. This consumer preference study on the trays was designed and built to better understand what a consumer's very initial impression was at the point of purchase of a vacuum skim pack tray as compared to a seawell tray. Participants were shown a comparison of the two packagings side by side on a table. Now, although these participants were untrained and unknowing of any specifics around either package, they were screened to be qualified based on if they regularly purchase seafood. So these were regular seafood buyers. These participants were permitted to hold the packages as if they were in the store to make their own observations, and then ask questions to the interviewer, resulting in voluntary feedback on the packaging. There was a range of commentary around topics of appearance, quality of the product, safety, and freshness, but some of the most noteworthy deductions on overall preference of the packaging came down to these listed here. 65% of the panelists preferred the seawell tray configuration over the vacuum skin pack, saying things like the seafood looked more natural without having plastic on top of it. They felt that they would have less preparation handling to do with the seafood in seawell, and they liked being able to shake the food around to get a good look on the food quality. Now, we left this first study scope as narrow as that, just to get this very first initial reaction response at that point of purchase. But it piqued our interest enough, so we set out to hear more from the public. After knowing liquid control was important and that we could maintain a robust enough pouch to make it through shipping conditions, we wanted to take the understanding of consumer sentiment a bit further. We wanted to know if the positives about the packaging systems were still being felt after delivery and receipt through e-commerce. Specifically, we wanted to know what we've been worried about. Were there going to be repeat buyers of it? To get some insight, we went back to Kaplan for help on driving meaningful consumer research on real handling feedback using the pouch formats. Both bags were packed with the same frozen, large raw peel-on shrimp, and they were allowed to thaw in the packaging 48 hours prior to the beginning of the study, which led to a large amount of liquid accumulation. We repeated the aforementioned preference study on a seawell pouch versus a plain clear poly bag like the ones we saw used on the direct-to-consumer products from a few slides before. Except this time we expanded the scope to get real responses on seeing, touching, opening, smelling, dumping. The panelists could really do whatever they wanted as if they were at home. These panelists were screened again to be buyers of seafood, but this time they had to have been recent receivers of it in some form of delivery within the past 3 months. Areas of questioning, assuming equal pricing and the same amount of shrimp, consisted of package preference for having this shrimp home delivered, reasons for that preference, and preference for these various attributes listed on the bar chart. Overall, there were considerably more negatives associated with the plain poly bag. The highest number of comments that limited consumer appeal on this bag were related to it appears to be low in and it contained too much water. And while many varied positives were attributed to the seawell pouch, the most common focus was the benefits derived from absorbency and having no liquid. Participants thought the seawell pouch would maintain the product longer and be safer and more secure for home delivery. They also highly valued the DripLox technology's ability to eliminate the need for draining when they were ready to cook. Oddly enough, several participants even believed that this liquid control made the shrimp look larger, which I thought was interesting. The biggest negative about the seawell pouch was we had a black backing. And in contrast, this was the biggest positive about the plain poly bag. Some people liked being able to see their product. This was the broadest rationale for those few who did prefer the plain packaging, and therefore something we do plan to address for future. The complete transparency allows consumers to see everything inside the package so they don't feel that we're hiding anything. So combining these positives by getting this material science into a clear configuration could be exceptionally powerful. Coming up on our last couple of slides, I'd like to share with you this one, which demonstrates the value proposition where there is a direct impact on sales following this absorption technology. For example, our current products in the marketplace improved shrimp sales by 24% from a previous packaging style to Seawell, 28% on lobster tails, and 57% on scallops. This data is from a non-e-commerce setting, but it's a strong indicator of the greater impact that we're all trying to make. It proves there is indeed a higher revenue return after improving quality and consumer experience. More importantly, though, we're very excited with the significant decrease in markdowns because this is a direct environmental impact improvement we are contributing to as a result of decreased waste. The reasons for these double-digit decreases can be directly correlated with the feedback from both consumer preference studies. The data about providing a better experience and a more visually appealing product that has been kept fresher for longer has had an ROI on the waste at retail levels. So you've learned how it works to extend quality and freshness, you've seen how consumers react to it, and now real-life impact on how it's improving sales and food waste. So before we wrap up, I'll leave you with these key takeaways. The seafood category has almost all the right stuff to become a higher preferred protein and maintain higher sales post-COVID. We believe better packaging throughout the supply chain can improve this category overall. Delivering positive consumer experiences consistently will bring and retain these new sales and new eaters. This shakeup in retail norms presents the ideal moment for reinventing this supply chain and flexible packaging through new business models and design innovation. If there was ever a time to rethink the status quo of our seafood for e-commerce, it's now. And with that, I'll open it up to Q&A and I'll hand it back to you, Jovi.
Thank you so much, Krista. And that does bring us to the Q&A portion of today's presentation. As a reminder, you can type your questions into the chat box and hit send to submit them. We will do our best to get to as many questions as we can in our remaining time. And we do actually already have a couple questions here, Krista. So one attendee mentions the evolution of supermarkets and kind of what you were saying about where we've come in the old days. What do you think the new age of supermarkets will look like if e-commerce continues to rise?
I guess the only thing I can think about is the way Amazon does it. So lots of big distribution, lots of fulfillment centers, really. I think about their little Amazon bots or, the pickers that come around. So I definitely think it's going to be lots of warehouse space and fulfillment centers. So prepackaged is probably going to be necessary.
Awesome. Another question we have here. Do you think that these retailers and shippers can keep up with this trend?
That's a hard question. I do think that they could keep up with the trend. I don't think it has to be hard, but it can't be thrown together. It's so hard to put that price tag on a non-repeat customer. I think us people who are in food forget what it's like to not know everything about it. And so one tiny thing can go wrong with the customer and they'll shut you out. So it pays to have a strong story about your product. It pays to deliver that good experience and quality. I think if we do the work for them, then yes, you can keep up with the trend as a small player. And as for the big players, the big retailers, they've been working on their own technology and advances throughout this whole thing. So yes, they are also expecting it to stick around, and and they've got the capital to invest in making it a better, easier experience. So I do think that yes, we can all keep up with the trend.
We just got another question here from one of our attendees. Will the materials be readily available to seafood processors, etc.?
They are available. They're available now, and currently it's been in a tray format and in a pouch format, and we do have the ability to manipulate that, do some different designs and some new different sizes depending on what product you're packing. So yes, assuming I've got something off the shelf that will work, but if not, we have the expertise to redesign something for you. But yes, the technology is ready.
Another question we have here. Has Aptar thought about a solution in e-commerce for live products? And they elaborated to say, is it challenging for a retailer to carry live seafood already, but what could be done for these types of products to survive in an e-commerce setting?
Yes, so that's actually been some of our I guess, more fun products to work with. And I think about live product like mussels, clams, oysters. I have not worked with a live lobster. I don't know how we would keep him alive, but with a rigid tray, we are able and do perform very well on live product. So the issue with those, most of those are in a net bag and they're on ice. So as long as we can maintain that cold chain, actually being in a rigid tray with the absorption technology actually ends up keeping that product very moist, and we will judge our quality and how well we do based on dead versus alive rate. So we kind of count it as a percentage, but we have had very, very positive experiences with live products, namely mussels, clams, and oysters.
Great. Another question we have here. What happens if consumers cut through the absorbent pouches in the pouch? Will this cause an issue?
It won't. Um, that's another reason we're kind of thinking about changing up the format a little bit. So if you look at that pouch schematic that we showed, it is possible that they could cut through it. However, everything in that blend is 100% food safe. It's a blend, it's a mix of 3 ingredients, and they're all GRAS certified by the FDA. So if it got on the food, they could wash it off. If they didn't wash it off and they cooked it, you know, it might be a little bit gritty, it might be a little bit bitter, but it's not going to hurt anybody. These are already safe for direct food contact, but also they're food inclusive. So very safe. Another thing that a retailer or whoever could do is just put a small label on there, just a very brief statement that said, you know, technology in the packaging is meant to keep your product fresher longer, just to kind of mitigate some of those fears in the home.
Great. We have another question related to the packaging itself. Can the packaging color be changed?
Sure, sure. So the technology, like I said, we can kind of implement it into anything, any sort of configuration or format. We've got several different types of trays right now, several different types of bags right now. So the color is just dependent on you. And like we saw in the pouch consumer preference study, actually clear may be best because a lot of consumers did really, really like to be able to look at their product. They like to. Some of the more negative comments on the colored pouches were just related to, we kind of got a half and half. So some people thought, hey, this looks really premium, I like this. And the others thought, no, I like the clear one because if it's colored and I can't see it, I feel like you're trying to hide something from me. So color doesn't matter. It's all about, what our partners want, and then clear is an option too. Thank you.
Um, so we got a question regarding the active ingredient. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by that?
In the very beginning, on the three-phase polymer is what I'm assuming that this question is related to, on that third active ingredient. So that active three-phase polymer, like I said, it's used in a lot of products that people count on every day. And in this case, we're using it for very high liquid control. In some instances, we've used it to release a volatile into in a gas phase, in the headspace of a package. In other instances, we've used it to scavenge. So instead of releasing something, we've used it to take something away, so that we use it for oxygen scavenging. Same thing with odor control. So it's really a lot of things. So it's that base polymer, so we can, and by that, it can be any shape that it needs to be. The best example I can give is diabetes test vials. If you have anyone in your family who's a diabetic, those diabetes test vials are also made by us. When you look inside of it, there's an extra piece of coating. It'll look like a coating. It doesn't come out. It looks like it's attached. You probably wouldn't recognize it unless you go look at it now, but that is an example of our three-phase polymer in an injection molded format. In the case of Seawell, it's doing high level liquid control in a powder format. So that active, that third, really can just be whatever it needs to be to perform whatever chemistry we're trying to accomplish. I hope that answers. So it's lots of different things, the active is.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Another attendee writes, how well does the pouch work with dry ice if I would like to keep the product colder for longer?
So, I'm sorry, can you repeat that one?
Yeah, absolutely. How well does the pouch work with dry ice if I would like to keep the
Okay.
product holder for longer?
Okay, sure. Dry ice is fine. We ship with dry ice if we need to ship it really far. I'm thinking of customers in Canada that I've had to ship back and forth to. You never know about customs, so we use dry ice in those instances. I know our customers use dry ice. Dry ice can be a little harsh on films. Um, Thinking about the lidding film on a tray or the films on the actual that the bags are made out of, it can be hard on it, but not detrimental. So you shouldn't have any worry. No worries with dry ice.
Great, thank you. Um, we do have another question here. How long can it be in the pouch once refrigerated? Customers often order multiple meals or seafood items and consume throughout the week.
So that's going to depend on the product that's in the packaging. The package, the pouch itself, it's not that you would, but essentially it could stay in there forever. But it's going to depend on the product that's in there and the shelf life of that product. Maybe whatever your shelf life might be right now, and you've got a label on there, or you make a recommendation. I know a lot of meal kits, I think they're like a 3-day. They recommend you cook that meal within 3 days. So if you don't, yes, that pouch can stay in the refrigerator. It would really just be dependent on that food product.
Got it. Thank you. Um, Another question we have here. Can you talk about using sustainable material in the packaging? This is clearly of interest to consumers, but a challenge for industry to identify food-safe materials that require less plastic.
Yeah, I do agree. Consumers have a much deeper understanding today of the impact that companies like us have on the environment. I do think that sustainability is hard to address, but that is good to get out in front of it. Um, I think packaging is always going to be a problem, whether it's seafood crops or raw materials. Consumers want to know how their favorite products are being brought to the stores. I think as long as we're all moving in a positive direction to decrease our plastic use and decrease our overall carbon footprints, we're already in so many positive steps forward. In our case, yes, we are a plastic manufacturer. However, we're part of many sustainable organizations across the globe. We are one of Barron's top 100 for a couple of years in a row now, top 100 most sustainable companies. And here at our local level, because we're vertically integrated, we do our own thermoforming processes, and we do work with film, like laminated film suppliers. We are actively working with sustainable and alternative material companies to find total, switch off solutions for these types of things. So it is something that we're working on right now. Our moving from a hard rigid tray and decreasing that plastic footprint, which is everything flexible packaging has been trying to do over the past few years. So you're already by a huge percentage decreasing the plastic that you are having to throw into the trash. Also, if you look at overall sustainability, and it's not just about plastic, it's about everything that we harm the environment with. Food waste is massive. And that's biggest at the retail and consumer level. So, looking at these consumer studies and looking at that sales data, 96% on lobster tails, decrease in waste, that's incredible. And, being able to provide that better experience for people and being able to present to them something that's appealing and that they want to buy, and you can decrease waste at that kind of a level, I think that's huge. So yes, we're working on plastic alternatives. Yes, we are very mindful in the way that we do manufacture our plastics. Everything is 100% recyclable right now. But we're certainly, like I said, all interested in moving in that positive direction.
Great. Thank you, Krista. That does seem to be all the questions we have for the time being. Is there anything else you'd like to address with the audience before we close out today's webinar?
No, I actually had a lot of fun doing this. And again, I want to, always a big thank you to our guests. So we wouldn't do this if we didn't have guests. So I appreciate everybody's attendance today. And thank you to you, Jovi, and thank you to Seafood Source.
Great. Thanks, Krista. So that's all the time we have for today's program. I just have a few housekeeping notes to go over before we officially close out. If you could please fill out the short evaluation form that will appear once you close the webinar. This will help us better serve your needs for future webinars. And as a reminder, the on-demand materials will be emailed to everyone within 3 business days. This will include a link to the recording of today's presentation, as well as Krista's contact information. Thank you again to Krista for a great presentation today, and thank you to all of our attendees for taking the time out of your busy days to join us. This webinar was brought to you by Seafood Source and sponsored by Aptar. Thank you all, and have a great day.